Sarah had always known that her bond with Max was something special. She had been only 12 years old when she first saw him, a small, floppy-eared golden retriever puppy of the local animal shelter. He was the last one left, looking up at her with big, soulful eyes that seemed to whisper, "Please take me home." And so she did. From that moment, they were inseparable. Max grew up alongside Sarah, sharing her every step. From the awkward teenage years to the early adulthood that followed, he was always there, a loyal companion, ready to listen when she needed to talk and comfort her when the world felt overwhelming. They had their routines, early morning walks, afternoon games of fetch in the park, and cozy nights spent curled up on the couch. Max wasn't just a pet. He was her best friend, her confidant, and a constant source of joy. But everything changed when Sarah got accepted to her dream college on the other side of the country. It was an exciting opportunity, one she couldn't pass up. Yet the thought of leaving Max behind tore her apart. Her parents had offered to look after him, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something would be different. Max was her dog, and the thought of him being far away from her, even in the care of her family, was almost unbearable. She promised herself she would visit often, but the reality of her new life would soon make those visits less frequent. The day of the move arrived, and it was a whirlwind of activity. Boxes piled up, furniture was disassembled, and the car was packed to the brim. Max, as always, was by her side, his tail wagging excitedly as he tried to figure out what was going on. Sarah had planned everything down to the smallest detail, but there was one mistake she didn't anticipate. Amid the chaos of packing and saying goodbye, Max slipped out of the yard and wandered off. By the time Sarah realized he was gone, panic set in. She and her parents scoured the neighborhood for hours, calling his name, asking neighbors, and posting flyers everywhere. But Max was nowhere to be found. It felt as though the world had come crashing down. Sarah couldn't comprehend how it had happened. One moment, he was there, and the next, he was gone. The weeks that followed were filled with heartache. She hired a pet detective, posted countless social media updates, and even visited the local shelters, but there was no sign of him. Sarah tried to convince herself that Max was okay, that he had simply wandered off and would find his way back home. But deep down, she knew that he wasn't coming back. The emptiness she felt without him was a constant ache in her chest, a reminder of the deep bond they had shared. Moving on to her new life was a challenge, but no matter how busy she became with college, there was always that missing piece. Max had been her world, and now it felt like something precious was lost forever. The pain never quite went away. It lingered in the background of her life, a quiet ache that resurfaced whenever she least expected it. But Sarah kept going, knowing that the world doesn't wait for anyone, not even when your heart is broken. After Max disappeared, his life took a turn in a direction Sarah could never have imagined. The family that found him were kind-hearted people living in a quiet suburban neighborhood a few miles from Sarah's old home. The husband, Tom, had been walking his own dog when he noticed Max wandering near a park, confused and disoriented. The dog appeared well cared for but looked like he had been lost for quite some time. Concerned, Tom gently coaxed him over with a treat, and when Max accepted, he knew he had to help. The family, unsure where the dog had come from, took him in without hesitation. They named him Buddy, a name that seemed to suit his gentle nature, though they had no idea of the connection he had to someone else. Max, or Buddy as he was now called, was given a warm bed and plenty of food, but there was an undeniable sadness in his eyes, one that made it clear he missed something or someone he couldn't fully express. As the days turned into weeks, Buddy grew accustomed to his new life. The family, Tom, his wife Lisa, and their 2 children, welcomed him with open arms. Buddy was gentle with the kids, patiently playing fetch and lying at their feet during movie nights. Though the family loved him deeply, there was an unspoken understanding that something was missing. Max didn't truly seem to belong to them, no matter how hard they tried to make him feel at home. He was a loving dog, but there was a quiet, distant look in his eyes whenever he sat by the window or curled up in his bed. Time passed and Buddy aged. His coat, once shiny and golden, began to dull with streaks of silver. His movements slowed, and his playful energy from the past began to fade. Tom and Lisa noticed the changes, and while they still adored him, they began to realize that the lively dog they had taken in wasn't the same anymore. Buddy had settled into a comfortable routine, but there was a sense that the years were taking their toll on him. Despite his age, Max's loyalty to the family remained. He followed them around the house, always content to be near them, but it was clear he missed the spark he once had. His attachment to his new family was real, but it wasn't the same connection he'd had with Sarah. Every now and then, he would show signs of restlessness, as if searching for something he couldn't find. When the family went on walks, Buddy would occasionally pull towards a familiar scent or stop and sniff the air, as though trying to follow a trail that led somewhere long lost. Through it all, the family cared for Max. They ensured he was comfortable and loved, but in the back of their minds, they knew that Buddy had a past, a history before them, with a life and a person he'd once known and loved. The family often wondered about the dog's origins, but accepted that they would never fully understand the depths of Max's past. Still, no matter how much time had passed, Max's quiet longing lingered, an invisible thread connecting him to a past he could no longer fully remember but felt deeply in his heart. Years had passed since Sarah last saw Max, but not a single day went by without her thinking about him. After the move, she had tried her best to adjust to her new life in college, focusing on her studies and making new friends. But every time she passed a dog park, heard the familiar jingle of a collar, or saw a golden retriever in the distance, a pang of sadness would grip her heart. Max had been more than a pet. He had been her family, and the emptiness without him was a constant presence in her life. For the first few months, Sarah threw herself into her studies, hoping that time would heal the ache of his absence. But it didn't. The grief was always there, tucked away in the back of her mind, simmering beneath the surface. She could never shake the guilt, wondering if Max had been hurt or abandoned. She blamed herself for not being there when he needed her most. The idea that he might still be out there somewhere, lost and alone, haunted her. Determined to find him, Sarah launched what became an annual tradition, the search for Max. Every year, she would spend hours scouring local animal shelters, posting on social media, and reaching out to rescue organizations. Each year, she hoped that maybe, just maybe, someone would spot him or that he would somehow find his way home. But as the years went by, Sarah began to lose hope. There had been no sightings, no updates, just silence. It was as if Max had disappeared into thin air. But Sarah refused to give up. She couldn't. The thought of Max still out there somewhere kept her going. Even though life had moved forward, she couldn't shake the belief that Max might still be waiting for her, just as she had always waited for him. It was a quiet Tuesday evening when Sarah first saw the post. She had been scrolling through her social media feed, absent-mindedly checking updates when something caught her eye. A local animal shelter had posted about a dog that had recently been surrendered, a golden retriever with strikingly familiar features. The dog, now called Buddy, had been found wandering the streets a few years ago, and the shelter was trying to find him a permanent home. The description was vague, but there was something about the dog's eyes in the photo that sent a wave of recognition through Sarah. Her heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could this be Max? Sarah's hands trembled as she clicked on the post, her mind racing with hope and disbelief. She read the description again and again, trying to find any detail that could confirm it. The dog was described as older, with a few gray hairs on his muzzle and a calm demeanor. His name, Buddy, was a stark contrast to the playful Max, but everything else, the shape of the face, the posture, the way he seemed to look directly into the camera, felt like a sign. The more Sarah thought about it, the more convinced she became that this could be him. The location was close enough to where Max had gone missing. The age was right. The description, although imperfect, felt familiar. Sarah knew she had to find out more. With trembling fingers, she reached out to the shelter, asking for more details about Buddy, desperate to know if this was, indeed, the dog she had lost so many years ago. The days following Sarah's message to the shelter felt like an eternity. Her heart raced with anticipation, yet fear gnawed at her every thought. Could it really be Max? Could this older, gray-muzzled dog still carry the spark of the pup she had known and loved all those years ago? She tried to steady her nerves, reminding herself that it was possible this was just a coincidence. A dog with a passing resemblance to Max, but ultimately a stranger. But deep down, Sarah couldn't ignore the flicker of hope that had ignited in her chest. The shelter responded just a few days later, confirming that the dog, Buddy, had indeed been found wandering the streets a few years back and had been living with a family ever since. The shelter staff explained that Buddy was an older dog now, gentle and calm, but had always been a bit reserved. There was no clear record of where he had come from, but the description matched what Sarah remembered of Max. The shelter also shared some photos of Buddy, and Sarah eagerly pored over each one. In one, he was sitting in a yard, his coat dulled but still thick and golden. In another, he was lying beside a child, his eyes soft and serene. There was no denying the resemblance. His eyes, those soulful eyes, seemed to glimmer with a recognition that reached Sarah across the screen. She felt an overwhelming sense of connection, even through the pixelated image. Could it be? Could this be the same dog who had been her constant companion during the most formative years of her life? Sarah reached out again, asking for more details. She needed to know everything about Buddy, his health, his personality, any habits or quirks that might help her determine if this was truly Max. The shelter's response was thoughtful and kind. They told her that Buddy had recently slowed down due to his age, and while he was still affectionate with his new family, he had become more withdrawn in recent months. His playful nature, the one he had as a young dog, seemed to have faded, and though he adored his family, there was always a sadness in his eyes. Reading this, Sarah's heart both broke and soared. She knew Max had always been a lively dog, full of energy and playfulness. The fact that Buddy seemed to have slowed down, that he seemed to carry some sadness, struck Sarah deeply. It was as though the years had worn away a part of him. But the more she thought about it, the more certain Sarah became. This was Max. This was the dog she had lost, and perhaps, just perhaps, the time had come for them to be reunited. With trembling hands, Sarah arranged to meet Buddy. She explained her story to the shelter, sharing her heartache and hope. They agreed to set up a meeting at a neutral location, a quiet park where Buddy wouldn't feel overwhelmed. The plan was set. The meeting would take place in a week's time. As Sarah prepared for the reunion, emotions she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years bubbled to the surface. She couldn't help but wonder, what if Buddy didn't remember her? What if he had completely forgotten everything they once shared? What if the reunion wasn't as magical as she hoped? But despite her fears, Sarah couldn't help but believe. There was something about Buddy's eyes that told her there was still a connection between them. And no matter how much time had passed, that bond could never truly be broken. As the days passed, Sarah found herself constantly thinking about the upcoming meeting. The excitement of potentially seeing Max again after so many years was almost too much to bear. But with that excitement also came a deep well of anxiety. The fear of disappointment, of not being able to rekindle the connection she had once shared with him, haunted her thoughts. What if Max didn't recognize her? What if Buddy had moved on and no longer had any memory of the life they had shared? Her mind raced with questions, each one more doubtful than the last. She remembered the way Max used to leap excitedly into her arms when she returned home from school, his tail wagging so hard it looked like it might fall off. Could a dog who had been through so much, lost, then found and grown older, still remember those moments? And if he did, would he even want to? Sarah knew that Max had been happy in his new home with the family that had adopted him, and while that gave her peace, it also made the thought of disrupting his life feel selfish. Still, she couldn't ignore the feeling in her gut, the belief that she had to do this. The bond they shared had been too strong to simply vanish with time. Max had been there for her during some of the toughest moments of her life, and she owed it to him to find out if they still had a chance to be together, even after everything. As the date of the meeting drew closer, Sarah made preparations. She found herself trying to remember every detail of her life with Max, hoping that something, anything, would spark a recognition in him. The scent of her old jacket, the sound of the whistle they used to call him inside, The way he loved his treats. She rehearsed these things, hoping they would help bring the dog she once knew back to life. The day before the meeting, Sarah found herself standing in front of the mirror, nervously adjusting her hair and checking the time. She was supposed to meet Buddy at the park at 2 p.m., a quiet spot in the middle of the town where she knew there would be few distractions. Sarah had decided to wear an old sweater she used to wear during their walks, something familiar, something that might trigger a memory. Her heart was in her throat, and she couldn't help but wonder if she was about to relive the moment she had dreamed of for years or face the painful truth that Max might be gone forever, in more ways than one. She drove to the park with a mix of dread and hope swirling inside her. The journey felt like it lasted forever, each minute stretching out in slow motion. When she arrived, her hands trembled as she stepped out of the car. The park was peaceful, with just a few people walking their dogs, but it seemed almost surreal to think that in a few minutes she might be face to face with Buddy, her Max, or someone entirely different. She walked to the spot where the shelter had arranged for them to meet, her heart beating faster with each step. It was a quiet area, surrounded by trees and benches, offering a sense of privacy that Sarah hoped would make the meeting less overwhelming for Buddy. She tried to steady her breathing, but the nerves were overwhelming. Would he recognize her? Would he remember the bond they had? Time seemed to slow as she waited, and Sarah couldn't help but reflect on everything that had led her here. She remembered the last time she'd seen Max, the confusion and panic of that day, the endless hours spent searching. She had never imagined this moment. This possibility could come to fruition, but now, standing there, she realized that no matter what happened next, she had given it everything. She had searched, hoped, and never truly let go. And soon, the moment of truth would arrive. Sarah stood nervously under the shade of a tall oak tree, her heart pounding in her chest. The minutes seemed to stretch endlessly as she watched the shelter staff, along with Buddy and his current family, make their way across the park. When they came into view, Sarah could feel the weight of the moment settle over her. This was it. She had dreamed of this day for years, and now it was finally here. But the reality was even more intense than she imagined. Buddy, or Max, was walking slowly alongside the family, his gait a little unsteady, his once vibrant coat now showing the signs of age. He looked around the park with a calm, somewhat distant expression, seemingly unaware of the monumental meeting that was about to unfold. Sarah swallowed hard, her eyes fixed on him, her mind racing. Was he still the same dog? Was there still a chance that the connection they had shared all those years ago could return? The family stopped a few feet away, and the shelter volunteer, a kind woman named Clara, stepped forward with a smile. "This is Buddy," she said softly, her voice full of warmth. "He's a good boy. He's had a long life, but he's always been well loved." Sarah nodded, her voice caught in her throat. She bent down to make herself smaller, trying to ease the tension in her body. "Buddy," she called out softly, her voice trembling. "Max, can you remember me?" Buddy's head turned slowly at the sound of her voice. His eyes, though clouded with age, seemed to focus on her for a moment. There was a long pause, and Sarah held her breath, hoping for some sign that he recognized her. Then, slowly, Max's tail began to wag. It was subtle at first, just a small flicker of movement. But then, as if a switch had been flipped, his whole body began to tremble with excitement. Sarah felt a rush of emotions surge through her: joy, relief, and a deep sense of love. Max's tail wagged faster, his eyes now fixed on her with an intensity that she hadn't seen in years. It was as though he recognized her, even if it took a moment for the memories to resurface. Sarah took a step forward, her voice soft and gentle. "Max, it's me. It's Sarah. Do you remember me?" Max's ears perked up, and with one swift movement, he bounded toward her. He wasn't as spree as he used to be, but his excitement was unmistakable. Sarah knelt down, and as he reached her, he pressed his head into her chest, his familiar warmth and softness enveloping her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she hugged him, unable to believe what was happening. Max was here. He was back. For a moment, everything else faded away. The park, the people, the years of searching, All of it melted into the background as Sarah and Max shared a quiet reunion. His tail wagged furiously as he licked her face, his old body shaking with joy. She could feel his heart pounding, just as hers was, as they reconnected in a way she had longed for. The family stood back, watching with tears in their eyes as the reunion unfolded before them. Clara, the shelter volunteer, smiled warmly. It's clear he remembers you. He's always been a special dog. Sarah couldn't speak at first. The emotions were too overwhelming. But finally, through the tears, she whispered, "I've missed you so much, Max. I'm so sorry I couldn't find you sooner." Max responded with a soft whine, nuzzling her gently. It was as if he, too, was trying to say that he understood. The years apart didn't matter anymore. In this moment, they were together again, and that was all that mattered. The family, recognizing the bond between Sarah and Max, quietly stepped aside, allowing them to have their moment. Sarah stroked Max's fur, whispering to him as if she were trying to make up for all the lost time. She knew it wouldn't be easy to take him back, but at that moment, it didn't matter. They had found each other, and that was a gift beyond measure. The reunion was everything Sarah had hoped for, and more. As she sat on the grass, holding Max close, it felt as though the years had melted away. His warmth, his familiar scent, and the way his head rested against her chest brought a sense of peace that she hadn't realized she'd been missing all this time. But as the initial flood of joy began to subside, reality crept in. Max, or Buddy, had lived a whole life with another family. He had been loved and cared for, and it wasn't clear what his life would look like now that Sarah had come back into the picture. The family stood back, watching the reunion with tears in their eyes. Tom, the father, was the first to approach Sarah. His voice was gentle but filled with emotion. "I can see how much he means to you. He's always been a good boy, and we've loved him like he was our own. But I can't deny that he's different now. He's older, and there's a part of him that's still looking for something." Sarah nodded, trying to hold back the tears that threatened to spill once more. She could feel the depth of the situation, the delicate balance between the life Max had built with this family and the life he had once shared with her. She knew she couldn't just walk away, but the idea of taking him back felt complicated. What was best for Max? Would he want to leave the family that had cared for him in her absence, or would he be happier with her where he belonged? "I don't want to take him away from you," Sarah said softly, looking at Tom and Lisa. "I know you've given him a wonderful home, and I'm so grateful for that. But I also know that he was my dog, and I've never stopped thinking about him. I've always wondered if he would remember me. And now I see that he does." Tom looked at Lisa and then back at Sarah. "He does remember you," he said quietly. "There's no doubt about that. But he's ours now too. He's been with us for so long, and we've watched him grow old. It's clear he has a strong connection with you, but we've loved him for all these years, and it's hard to imagine him being somewhere else." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with the weight of the decision. Sarah's heart ached, torn between the desire to take Max home and the understanding that this family had been his home for so long. Max, in his older years, had found comfort and routine with them. Could she just pull them away from everything he had known? Would he be better off staying with them? "I don't want to cause any harm," Sarah whispered, looking down at Max, who was now resting at her feet, his head tilted slightly as if sensing the tension in the air. "I just want what's best for him." Lisa stepped forward, her eyes filled with understanding. "We know you love him, and he clearly loves you. But we've seen how much he's changed over the years. He's slower now, quieter, and it's clear he's been searching for something." She paused, taking a deep breath. "We can't keep him forever, but we also want what's best for him. If you want him back, if you think he'd be happier with you, we won't stand in the way. But it has to be your decision, and his." The weight of her words hit Sarah hard. It wasn't just about her. It was about Max, about what was best for him now that he was older and had experienced so much. She looked at Max, her heart aching with the decision ahead. She realized that no matter what, this would never be easy. But after everything, she knew that Max deserved to have a life that made him happy, wherever that might be. "Maybe we just need some time," Sarah said softly, looking at the family. I need to figure out what's best for him. Maybe we can figure this out together. And so, the decision was left in the balance, a choice between the family that had cared for him for so long and the life he had once shared with Sarah. The following days were filled with deep reflection for Sarah. After the emotional reunion, she found herself torn between two worlds. Max, or Buddy, had clearly formed a bond with the family that had cared for him all these years. They had given him love, comfort, and a stable life. But her connection with him was undeniable. The memories, the bond they once shared, and the unmistakable recognition he had shown when they reunited. Sarah knew that making the right decision for Max was paramount, and she didn't take the responsibility lightly. She spent the next few days visiting the family, watching Max interact with them. She could see that, despite his age, he was still deeply loved. The children were gentle with him, and Tom and Lisa treated him like one of their own. But there was something in the way Max looked at Sarah during their moments together. The joy in his eyes was unmistakable, and she could feel the connection between them reigniting. Yet she also saw that he seemed at ease with his family. He was home, in a way. One afternoon, Sarah sat with Lisa and Tom, discussing what was best for Max. It was a conversation that neither of them wanted to have, but it was necessary. The question was no longer about love. It was about what would give Max the most peace, joy, and comfort in his later years. "We know he's been with us a long time," Lisa began, her voice full of warmth. "But it's clear that he's always had a special place in your heart, Sarah. Maybe it's time for him to be with you again. We just want to make sure that it's the right thing for him." Tom nodded in agreement. "We don't want to be selfish. He's family to us, but we know you two have a history. If you feel that Max would be happier with you, we won't stop you." It was at that moment that Sarah realized the truth. Max wasn't just their dog or her dog. He was a part of all of them. The family had been his caretakers, but she had been his first person. The love they shared was mutual, even if it had been stretched across the years. What mattered most now was Max's happiness, and she knew that he deserved the chance to live his remaining years in a place where he felt the most love and peace. After a few more visits, Sarah made her decision. She gently spoke to Max, as if asking for his approval. "If you want to come home with me, Max, you can, but only if you think it's right. I want you to be happy." And then it happened, the moment that solidified her choice. Max slowly walked over to her, his body a little stiff, but his eyes filled with trust. He leaned into her as if saying, "I'm ready." His tail wagged softly as he nuzzled her face, a gesture that brought tears to Sarah's eyes. She knew deep down that he was ready to start this next chapter with her. Sarah turned to the family, her heart filled with gratitude. "Thank you. You gave him a beautiful life, and I'll always be grateful for that. But I think he's ready to come home." Tom and Lisa smiled, their faces filled with understanding. "We'll miss him, but we know it's time. Take care of him. He's a special dog." And so, with a final wave and a few tears, Max left his second home and returned to Sarah. Their reunion had come full circle. Though the road had been long and filled with uncertainty, Sarah knew that Max's heart had never truly wandered far from hers. As they drove back to her apartment, Max curled up in the passenger seat, his familiar presence beside her once again. There was no more searching, no more wondering. They were together, and that was all that mattered. The years ahead wouldn't be without challenges. Max was aging, and his energy wasn't what it used to be. But Sarah was ready. She had gotten a second chance with the dog she had never stopped loving, and this time she wouldn't let go. Together, they would make the most of the time they had left, creating new memories and cherishing the ones they had lost along the way. It was the beginning of a new chapter, one filled with love, loyalty, and the promise of never being apart again.